Hi, good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education of Tuesday, March 11th. Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belville.
Here.
Benford.
Here.
Fuqua.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everyone who's joined us here this evening of the vision of the Boulder Valley School District. We develop our children's greatest abilities and make possible the discovery and pursuit of their dreams, which when fulfilled will benefit us all. We provide a comprehensive and innovative approach to education and graduate successful, curious, lifelong learners who confidently confront the great challenges of their time. Tonight, we'd like to start this meeting with the superintendent's report. Dr. Messenger.
Good evening, President Albright, members of the board. Welcome. Good to have you here this evening. And the first item I would like to just mention for the benefit of our audience is the recognition that we all just participated in of those teachers that have passed the national boards for their professional work in our school district. We had over 20 educators that have finished their national boards, and we'll add to the now I think about 150 educators in our system that have participated in this program and successfully completed the National Board certification. We see this as a way to increase the quality of instruction and opportunity for our students throughout the district, and I applaud the educators who participated, and to Virginia Scheck, who is from Boulder High School, art teacher there, who has helped for a number of years coordinate that program in our district. And so to applaud them, and thanks to each of you as board members for attending that reception to help with that celebration. Just a couple of things. One of the items on the agenda this evening is a contract for Enrich, which is a data management system. So there was kind of an extensive background provided in your agenda document. As you reviewed that, this is, as we go forward, a helpful piece to us to help both store and manage data that we collect now. We simply don't collect it in any one place. So it's really cumbersome for educators, teachers, and principals to pull that data, use it, and use it for their analysis around decision making for students. And as we work on READ plans and 504 plans, pulling that data together, this also has in the software helps us bring that data together and develop goals and plans for students, so it becomes a management system for that over time. We use its counterpart system presently in special education, so we are familiar with the software, we're familiar with the company, and have a relationship with them. That software for special education is used throughout the state. It is not provided for the other areas, just special education. That's a state-sponsored program for special education. So we see this as a complementary piece. So we'd be glad to answer questions as we get to that agenda item, but I thought in case there wasn't discussion around it. So it will involve some training and support for our staff, but we believe it'll be a really helpful tool for us going forward. So I just wanted to mention that in the event that we didn't have a chance later in the consent agenda item. The other thing I want to mention briefly, we're working diligently to fill some administrative vacancies right now in the school district. A position that I personally have been very involved with is we have a vacancy for an assistant superintendent for school leadership, and so those interviews have taken place this week. I guess today's Tuesday, so the last 2 days we interviewed 3 finalists today. We're very pleased with that candidate pool, and our hope would be that we can make an announcement on that position prior to spring break, and we have a couple others that are in the queue that we're working on as well. So it's been very busy, and we'll be doing some teacher hiring soon. We've been involved in, hosted our student teachers for BVSD have the opportunity to have an interview fair. They had that just this last weekend in this building. Over 90 student teachers participated in that. It gives them a chance to go through an interview process. And so we have principals and human resources personnel who volunteer to host that. So that's a big deal. And then there are several others that are occurring in the Front Range over the next few weeks that we'll be involved in. Mostly that work will be around recruiting teachers for vacancies that we have open. So anyway, it is the season for hiring in our profession, and folks are really busy. Then the other thing I wanted to mention just briefly, in your planning calendar, next Tuesday, a week from tonight, March 18th, we have a work session, our regular 5 o'clock start time for a work session, a light meal, and we have 2 topics on that agenda which came out of our board planning a week ago. Kathy Gebhardt has agreed to be here with us to visit about the Amendment 23 complaint that is being developed, and so she'll give you an update on that and answer your questions. So I look forward to that discussion, and then also a follow-up on our transportation services a year ago or so. Bob Young and Don Orr shared with you the results of a study. We've done some work around that, and it's time for you to give an update on the progress we're making, and also a few other things we're working on with regard to transportation. So right now, those are the 2 topics we have planned for the work session on March 18th. So I have some other things that will fit into the legislative update part of the agenda, so I'll stop there, but I'd be glad to answer any questions or elaborate on any of those topics if there's interest. Thanks.
Board members, questions? I had a question about the assistant superintendent search.
Yes.
Will there be a chance for the public or others to meet the candidates?
So we had a reception last night. Sorry.
Okay.
We had some staff who, mostly building level staff, principals who came, and so just to remind you of our process, we have a committee that represents parents, advocacy groups, teachers, principals, central office administration. We had actually, we were very pleased with the response to this position. A week ago, yesterday, we did 9 pre-screening face-to-face interviews to bring that pool down to a more reasonable number, and so we advanced 5 for interviews with that larger committee. We had 7 who interviewed in the pre-screening a week ago, 7 members of a cabinet who participated in the pre-screening, advanced the 5, and then we had the larger 10-member, I think it was 10 members yesterday, 10, who did the interviews yesterday, and then we invited folks to come in and visit with them. And then we advanced, of those 5, yesterday we advanced 3 for a more in-depth, less formal interview today with members of the instructional leadership team and myself. And so we've done background checks, some reference checks, we'll do more. And so, again, our goal was to try to get that wrapped up by spring break if we can. So anyway.
Good.
Yeah, it's a good response from our all Colorado candidates in this finalist group. So, yeah, so.
Well, we don't mind if they're out of state from Montana or somewhere else.
Well, we probably had some interest from those states, but we, in this particular group, we're all from Colorado. So.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? Any questions of the superintendent? No? Okay. The next item on our agenda is public hearing and public participation, and we don't have any signups. So let's move into board communication. If anyone has any comments they'd like to make. Sam?
Just following up on your comment, Dr. Messenger, about the public receptions. I really appreciate your doing that.
Yep.
I attended the Boulder High School principal finalist and spoke with a number of parents appreciative for that opportunity.
Yeah.
So thanks to
Yeah,
you
good
and Dr.
turnout.
Pilch for
Yeah.
arranging that. And also just another statement about the National Board Certification reception, because it is one of the most inspiring events of that type that I attend as a board member, to see these teachers working extra hard for their own professional growth and development. Makes me, just very proud to be part of the district. Wonderful event, and congratulations to all 20 of those teachers. And we're number 1, right, in terms of in the state
the
of
number
having
1.
the most
That's my
board
understanding.
certified?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Great, thanks. Tom? Thank you.
So, yes, I'll echo that as well. Great ceremony. I think I count up, I've been to 5 of those now. And all those continue to impress me at the hard work that goes into that, the dedication and the real impact it has on the individual teachers and, of course, on our students. That's where we really are reaping benefits on that kind of activity. Shelley and I attended the DAC meeting this last week over primarily you'll see tonight on the Unified Improvement Plan. So DAC has come forward with some recommendations, so there's top executive level set of recommendations. And there's a whole set of individual group notes that go along with that, if you had an opportunity to read those. I think they're very, very good recommendations. I'm looking forward to that discussion. I won't say any more about that. But additionally, there are continuing concerns, I shared with Dr. Messenger tonight, over Louisville Elementary overcrowding or potential overcrowding. And talked to some of the parents recently about that, having a number of emails. And I was told that we were to receive a letter, and Dr. Messenger said we actually got that today from the mayor. And so the concerns wraps around the obvious overcrowding potential. What's going to be the solutions to that? What are the real projections? And the people I talked to, they would like to see a little bit more of a longer-term projection that takes in some more of the recent data. Some of the feelings is that some of the recent data wasn't presented to the Louisville City Council, and some of the mayor's comments wrapped around that. So I'm anxious to see this letter. I assume you'll be sharing with us at some time. And when is our next scheduled meeting with Louisville City Council? Do we have that on the agenda yet?
So if I could,
go right ahead.
A couple of, to Tom's question. So we did just receive the letter today. It was from the city manager, from Malcolm, and so I'll forward that to you. There were several questions, some recognition of Glenn and Don's presentation and appreciation for that, but also a couple follow-up questions. So I'll have Don and Glenn and their team prepare responses to those as best we can. And then, in closing, they asked that we might come together. So I think it was 2 years ago. It was my first year that I was here. Mayor Sisk was still there. So as you know, we've got to Boulder, and Broomfield's scheduled. So it just takes us a while. So we'll work back with agenda setting team and see, what I know our spring's going to get away from us. But we'll certainly respond to the letter and copy you on the response as well as the letter, so you have that. So, I mean, I think we believe we're in good shape for the start of school next fall with what's been adjusted within the school. I think they would affirm that as well. I think, as you mentioned, Tom, some of the question about how this plays out over time, and some of that we can more accurately predict than other things. But I certainly think it's a conversation we want to continue with the community, and so. But I'll copy you on that correspondence.
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks. Yeah, and I agree. I think the concern is not over next year,
correct,
but over future years. And with some of the realization that we're starting to run out of the tools in our toolbox, we've closed down to open enrollment and so on, and that's going through, but we're still getting close to capacity there on the schools. And I don't know if we'll hear anything from SIPSI tonight on recommendations for expansion of that school or dealing with some of those overcrowding issues or not, but that was some of the other questions that we got associated with that. Yeah. Great. That's all.
Okay, thanks. Dean? No? Shelley? No? Tina?
Yeah, I was able to do the CASB Day at the Capitol 2 weeks ago. I know our scheduled one is in April, but because I'm new, I wanted to get down there a little sooner. And I was fortunate. I was able to listen to the House Education Committee discuss the study for assessment and testing. And I was really encouraged. I really appreciated the types of questions they were asking, the discussion they had, and of course it passed right there. And it was a great experience down at the legislature, and I had a lot of, I felt really encouraged by the people who are in that committee, actually. So just thought I'd share that.
Thanks.
So I was able to attend History Day both at Broomfield Heights Middle School, where I was a judge for the day, and at Aspen Creek, where I just stopped in. And I'd like to give a shout out to the social studies teachers who arranged that, who were in the. There are other social studies teachers throughout the district who do that. I happen to know Paula Kaufman at Broomfield Heights Middle School and Lisa Turner at Aspen Creek. Because it's a lot of work for the teachers, but the learning that goes on is pretty stellar. I was really impressed at the learning that went on, and I was also really we need to thank the community members who showed up. Some of them from as far away as Longmont. They have connections at Broomfield Heights Middle School, I guess, to give a day to judge to judge the History Day. And I know the same thing is true at Aspen Creek. So we've got great support from the community out there, and I'd like to thank people for that. And then another shout out to the 6th grade Brain Bowl team at Aspen Creek, who invited me for lunch and were some of my former students. And Dr. Messenger, you were there as well. And I think we also have to thank it's not the Rotary, it's the Optimists. We have to thank the local Optimists who or the Denver Metro Optimists who sponsor that program every year, because it's a big undertaking for them as well, and it's just students from all over the Front Range and from the mountains and from as far away as Wyoming, I think, attend the Brain Bowl and have a really good time, and it's a good activity for them. So thanks again to members of our community, the Optimists in this case, who support education in our schools.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, the next item on our agenda is the legislative update. So, I'm not sure who's talking. I guess Briggs and Bruce, it looks like.
Well, I would be glad to mention a couple of things. I know Briggs has updates as well. So I would just mention kind of the ongoing work of the Colorado superintendents in partnership with our associations and many others, and truly trying to advocate for increased levels of funding for schools across the state. So that work, as you know, has been going on through the session, and I think still making good progress. I have a meeting tomorrow. We're inviting all the superintendents to come together, so we'll have a good gathering tomorrow to kind of just touch base, make sure we're all together, what conversations. Last Wednesday, excuse me, a subgroup of the superintendents met with Representative Hamner and Representative Murray. Representative Hamner is the chair of the House Ed Committee, and Representative Murray serves on that committee, and they are co-sponsoring House Bill 1292 along with Senator Johnston, which I think you're familiar with. And so it is a formal call for additional funding through that piece of legislation. The hearing occurred a week ago Monday. Bill Sutter gave testimony at that. Our budget director gave testimony at that hearing. It was a long hearing, as you've probably read in the news, and I think really good testimony around the issues related to it. So the purpose of the meeting last Wednesday was really to meet with them, 6 or 8 of us, to have conversation about where we go from here. So had a good 90-minute conversation. They answered some questions we had about motivation around some aspects of the legislation, which at least help us better understand. And then they asked for some feedback on areas regarding average daily membership, the at-risk funding aspect of it, and just the ongoing funding versus the one-time funding. So good conversation around that. Those will be topics that we'll visit with the superintendents about tomorrow. One of the other things they asked for was, as a group of superintendents, given that we're a kind of a grassroots effort, that it'd be good if they had a few folks that they could consider at least liaisons with so as there are ongoing conversations. It's difficult to communicate with 178 people at the same time, obviously. So we're working with them on that, and I think that may come out of tomorrow's meeting as well. Clearly, they stated not much is going to happen for a month, now maybe 3 weeks. We're going to get through the forecast, see where that's at on March 18th. At some point, the House Ed Committee will take action on 1292. They have not done that yet. It's waiting for action, and then obviously would advance to the full chamber of the House. And then we think there'll be equally engaging dialogue on the Senate side of this discussion, is our understanding, and so might go through some changes as it makes its way there. So that's work that we've been doing on school funding. I would just say that part of what we've been trying to communicate, and certainly did that day in our conversation with those 2 legislative leaders, is that we're going to work hard to secure as much funding and as the most flexible way as we can for next school year. I mean, that's what we're all working on, right? But we are very committed to do this over time. We understand to get closer to adequacy, we don't do that in 1 year. So we really want to make a commitment as a group of superintendents working with our education partners and with the legislature to really look on longer-term strategies about how we both secure adequate funding over time, and also obviously we're going to need to identify some other revenue streams because there's only so much money in the state budget. We understand that. We obviously want a little more of that fixed amount, but we know that to increase the amount of revenue in the state will be a helpful part of the solution as well. So anyway, good work around that, and we're monitoring several other bills as well, and I think Briggs would like to give an update at least on what's happening on the 18th of March and maybe other items as well. Briggs, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger, members of the board. We are in partnership with the Great Education Colorado nonprofit education advocacy group. We're going to be hosting BVSD Advocacy Day at the legislature on Tuesday, a week from tonight, Tuesday, March 18th. And we are seeking a group of 8, not including board members and Dr. Messenger and myself. And just with sending the invitations out today, we've already filled 5 of the 8 slots. So we think the problem is going to be making sure our group is still manageable. But we will be meeting with legislators in our delegation to urge them to make funding the negative, buying down the negative factor a priority. The Great Education Colorado on February 18th delivered a letter to the state legislature asking them to sign up if they supported buying down the negative factor. And 7 of our 8 BVSD area legislators have signed that letter already from both political parties. And so we'll be thanking them, but reinforcing the necessity to find dollars and to find dollars that are recurring and that provide a base to build on for the coming years that Dr. Messenger just described. So what'll happen is we'll get to the Capitol around 9:30 on Tuesday, working with Great Education Colorado staff and ourselves and our lobbyists will be pulling out legislators off the floor, inviting them to come out and speak to subgroups of our group. And we will thank those who signed the pledge, and we'll try and make our case to that one who hasn't. We will urge them to keep that in their mind because it's a big day on the 18th. The other thing that's happening on the 18th that affects the whole state is the spring revenue forecast comes out that afternoon. And that will, at that point, you really, you kind of joke that the first half of the legislative session does about 15% of the work. And that's about where we're at right now. We're a few days past the midpoint. Next Tuesday comes the revenue forecast. At that point, the JBC staff, the Joint Budget Committee staff, and the legislature have the numbers, and they begin to move the budget. They begin to move the School Finance Act, and they will begin to move House Bill 1292. And hopefully our negotiations will have made that a better bill, a bill we can eventually support. So it's this next week is going to be a very important week in the legislature. It'll really begin to dictate how the rest of the session is going to go. So if there's any questions about that or any questions about what's going on next Tuesday, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay. I want to thank, by the way, both Tina Arquis and Jenny Belval, the board's legislative liaisons, for volunteering to come down and be a part of that next Tuesday, so that'll be great. Thank you.
Questions, board members? Questions, comments? Comments about the negative factor? Jenny.
So I'm having a little trouble with the way 1292 interacts with the school finance bill. I mean, it seems a little irregular to me. They can, the legislature can do it however they want, but I'm having a little trouble understanding that.
Well, and Leslie might be able to speak in greater detail on this, but the School Finance Act is structurally, and I think we talked about this a lot last year when Senate Bill 213 was, the basic structure of the the School Finance Act is the same as it was the last time it was fundamentally rewritten in 1994. So what happens is when the School Finance Act comes, it's only about anywhere from 5 to 7 pages. Which for a bill that handles that much money seems very short. But all they're really doing is amending the dollar amounts at the key points in the School Finance Act to reflect what they're going to appropriate for the coming year. And so the School Finance Act right now reflects the governor's proposal with a slight increase. The governor, when he proposed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cecily, but when the governor proposed his budget on November 1st, the inflation rate was thought to be 2.6%. So the increase this was projected for that reflected in the bill, which is House Bill 1298, reflected was going to reflect 2.6. Since then, inflation has been adjusted to 2.8%, and the bill reflects that. 1292 is additional legislation. It's not. We would argue it's required by the Constitution because it's paying down a negative factor that wasn't, we believe, constitutionally based. But it is not just taking care of inflation and increased enrollment. It's meant to be more than that. So it's a separate piece of legislation.
But is the funding in it ongoing, or will they have to write another 1292
The bill is
every
introduced, the
year?
funding, $100 million of the funding. Right now, the bill, as introduced, totaled $263 million. Of that, $100 million is recurring money, or meant to be recurring money. Approximately $163 million is one-time money. Now, some of that's capital construction money.
So would that have to be accounted for in upcoming school finance acts, or is it just?
So the 100
wandering out the arrow
million
by
will be, it basically just adds money to the School Finance Act. And so the way the School Finance Act works is it's the full funding, then they back it back out. And so they would just back, if it passes as it is, they'd back out what they plan to do under the governor's budget, less 100 million. So that's actually the School Finance Act. It just simply authorizes it to occur. The other aspects, so there's some reasons it's packaged the way it is. So the one-time money is not in the School Finance Act. It'll be one-time authorization, whatever number that winds up being. They did it on a per-student basis. That's now $40 million. It was an earlier version, $100 million. Then the ELL is not in the School Finance Act. It sits outside, and so it won't grow. So the READ Act already is embedded in legislation. This simply moves a little more funding, kind of doubles the amount of funding. And so I think the way I've looked at it, it's a complementary piece of legislation. They ran them together so that they could show the total investment or increase. There's obviously some reason they wanted to do that. So, but, you know, the School Finance Act is reauthorized every year or not. I mean, so it's an annual action in a budgeting process. So in some ways, they're similar, but some of them will drop off if they don't either embed that money in the School Finance Act or have another 1292 next year where they give some other one-time money. So, but the reason they put them together in the hearing was so that it would look like the total investment, or is the total proposed investment. And then depending on what the Senate does to it, I mean, it's hard to know where to wind it. But that was their motivation, I think.
So I do have a couple of comments, and one is that I've still, so I didn't hear, I heard you say some stuff about ADM. Is the transparency piece still in there? So
Oh, yes.
So I still have real concerns about devoting $15 million to bookkeeping measures that have to do, and the argument I keep hearing is, oh, districts would like ADM, I mean, you know, multiple accounts because it gives them an opportunity to capture funding for students who join. And I really regret that the legislature can't, in that case, make it optional. Districts would benefit by multiple accounts. They could do the multiple accounts, and if it would just be an administrative headache, that they shouldn't have to. I mean, I think that would be a reasonable compromise, maybe. Now, I don't really expect you to answer that, Briggs, because,
Well,
and the same thing with the transparency. I think we're pretty darn transparent already. We've really worked hard on that in my time on the board, and I think that's something that a lot of districts take pride in, is their transparency, so.
I would just, I think, Bill Sutter gave incredible testimony on this point.
Thank you,
This
Bill.
very point at the legislature, and I found that his testimony, the notes he sent around for us to look at before he went down, or probably give you the most cogent explanation of how difficult it is. It's almost like we're 85-90% transparent, and sometimes the cost of capturing that last small percentage, you have to question, you know, in terms of timeliness or being able to produce it automatically. Yet you question, is that worth the investment considering all the other needs that are in the classroom? And so it's a question of real value added. And I thought Bill, I would just maybe suggest that Bill share his remarks, because they were some of the best testimony that day.
So in our meeting with Hamner and Murray, they've made the point that this isn't intended to be punitive around the ADM, that they're not motivated to remove money from school districts that might have a drop in their enrollment through the course of the year. So if we accept that, that that's not a motivation, and that the motivation really is to capture students who might join a district later in the year because of the employment base, like the ski industry, or whatever demographic. So it was suggested to them in the meeting we had a week ago was that for school districts that don't need that opportunity, Boulder Valley would be one of those. We really don't need a second count opportunity, that our enrollment's pretty stable. But if Summit County, for example, because of the ski industry, say, just make up numbers, maybe they grew 10% by second semester, then let districts petition to be allowed to do a second count, and they would be recognized for that count and receive the money, a boost in that second semester, if that's what, and districts who don't, and then districts who would decline second semester wouldn't be required to do it, and they wouldn't lose revenue. So Denver Public Schools loses almost 20% in their second count, and some in the metro area that are high poverty, even greater percentage than that. And so we just talked about the irony of, in one aspect of 1292, trying to move money towards our school districts that have the highest at-risk population, which makes sense, and we're supportive of that. And then within the same bill, ADM would be taking money back away, maybe more than they're putting in. And so, anyway, we had a good conversation around that. I would just say they were receptive to discussing this notion of a second count, a February count maybe, for districts who found that that would be beneficial. And I don't think anybody has heartburn over if a district really does see increased count, or if they add more students because dropout recover, whatever, that if it really justifies their investment of time and resources to do a second count, then I think generally we'd be supportive of that. So the other piece on the transparency, so some of what was recognized in that conversation is there isn't anything that would result from this that isn't presently available. It would simply make it easier to access and easier to retrieve for those that were motivated to do that. And we don't think that's probably the average citizen, but there are probably organizations that would be motivated to do that. And so one of the aspects of the transparency that makes us particularly anxious is that it actually follows the expenditure per student by school. So since 90% of our investment in public education is human resources, one, tracking all of that for itinerant staff and all that could just be challenging. Then the differentiation in cost for staff in a given building may not have anything to do other than the fact they might be a less senior staff, or so their pay grade is just different. It isn't not an indication of quality necessarily, or anything else. And so a fear that we have is the misuse of that data to show that School A can educate children for $1,000 less per student than School B, doing a correlation between cost per student and achievement, maybe standardized tests. Then why can't we all be like School A? Well, because we maybe don't employ all those same people. And, so the variability that could occur even within a district, let alone across districts, and trying to draw comparisons and conclusions from that makes some of us pretty nervous, because we've seen that happen with other uses of data that really lead to confusion and maybe misunderstanding. So, again, all that could be done today, theoretically, but it would just make it more convenient. And, Representative Murray indicated that there's some motivation around this that isn't necessarily motivation that we would endorse. I think it's one that we need to continue. Both of these, I think, we need to continue to work on. Probably not because of the price tag. $15 million out of $11 billion is not that big of a number, but certainly the burden it could place on local districts, and maybe the misuse of data over time. So those are a couple of aspects of the bill that we have spent a fair amount of time on.
Great. Shelley?
Isn't the transparency issue partially driven by charter schools too?
It is. That's what Representative Murray shared with us, that again, this is all data that's available upon request, but so what she just explained, which we understand because we've had some of these discussions with our charters as well, is that there are fees assessed, cost assessed that are in a part of the contract, And sometimes charters feel like they're being charged for services either that they not sure they want, or they don't want as much of, or they don't want it in the way it's being packaged. So those are contract negotiations. I mean, that's not surprising that those would be things you'd work on. But again, I think our contracts with our charters are all public information. Anybody could have them. Obviously, our charters could share that information. They know what the cost is, and it's an ongoing conversation. But yes, I think that collection of that group data and that easier analysis is part of the motivation behind that. That's at least the other related issue is in our district for some time when we've had mill levy overrides or bond issues, we've worked in partnership with the charters to develop those proposals, and we've shared the benefit of the revenues that flow as a result of that, and we will in the next bond issue if we have one is our plan. That's not true in all districts. It is true in most districts. There are some exceptions. Again, we think it's a small problem for some that they probably just need to deal with locally, and they have all that data so they could make it really transparent. They could just share it. I mean, when we were in hearings last year on Senate Bill 213, the School Finance Act that was being rewritten, this was a big discussion about the use of mill levy override dollars and bond dollars in partnership with charters. And again, what we found is maybe not everybody started there 15 years ago, but most all districts are there now, and the others who aren't are probably in that conversation right now. So again, as has been stated on some of these, it might be a solution looking for a problem. And, again, I don't think it's necessarily local communities or districts that are wanting access to this data. I think it's other interests that play into our educational system.
Board members? Well, I am just reminded then that we passed a resolution, what the beliefs are of this board and what we're urging, and stay true to that, and we'll look forward to hopefully some success on this matter. So thank you, Briggs. Thank you, Dr. Messenger. The next item on our agenda is the Capital Improvement Planning Committee update. It looks like
So making
Fran
their way
and
to the
Adam.
podium are our co-chairs for the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, Fran Ryan and Adam Fells. They've been before you before. Our commitment at the beginning of the year was that we would provide you regular written updates, which you've received, and on occasion, maybe quarterly, we would have an in-person update. And so Adam and Fran are prepared to do that this evening. And so we're in the final stretch, we feel like. So please.
Good evening, Board. Bruce, thank you for inviting us. Fran, I'll let you start.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger. And again, this is just an update since we've been here, I guess, 4 months ago. We've been working very fast and very strategic. Just to remind you, the project managers have been working with the individual schools for the last 20 months, accumulating individual school needs. And then we created 7 committees that are more district-wide issues to look at: the technology, security and safety, the transportation issues, ideas about this campus, the central kitchen, our special education program. So we had subcommittees in addition to all the work that the project managers have been doing. It's been very iterative. It's ebbed and flowed. I'd like to applaud Dr. Messenger for allowing, Adam said the other day, the process to breathe, because we're working really fast. The SIPSI committee meets once a month. In fact, we're meeting tomorrow. And the subcommittees probably have met a couple times a month. So there's a lot of pace. And Bruce has been very supportive of allowing for a full discussion on what the needs are. We are prioritizing the recommendations, and that has been a boatload of fun. As you can imagine, there are a lot of deferred maintenance issues that are kind of the boring things. I don't want to say that about Don's job, but there's just a lot out there that are not innovative things that everybody wants to focus on. So we are prioritizing. We've created an executive committee that is made up of SIPSI members and members of the cabinet. We've brought the recommendations to the executive committee. They have, in some instances, reprioritized some of the recommendations. The discussion usually focuses on the goals of the school district, the mission, and the values that you all adopted. I can think one in particular, your fitness goal and wellness goal, helped guide one of our discussions around what type of space to come back to recommend. And I think Adam is going to talk about next steps.
Thanks, Fran. So obviously, we're coming towards the end of the school year, and part of what we're trying to make sure occurs is a lot of communication between both our district personnel from cabinet and staff and directors, and bringing that information back to SIPSI to vet. And we're in the process now where we've had 2 executive team meetings, or 3, excuse me, and each time we go back to SIPSI. And so we're in that part where we're merging those priorities. And eventually, before we present you that final document of priorities, we really need to have our community weigh in a larger way. So what I want to talk about is our communications plan, which involves adding 6 community meetings. And I think we have a slide on that. I don't know, am I supposed to pull that up, or does that happen magically?
It's magic.
Okay, so here's the magic. So what I want to talk about now is, now that we're starting to merge these prioritized needs between Ed Center staff and principals and teachers with SIPSI, it's time to take those big ideas to the community. And as you can see on the slide, we're going to go pretty hard and pretty fast here. So starting April 1st, which we're going to talk about tomorrow night in SIPSI, will be the first community meeting. And that'll end April 14th. We would like to make sure you guys as a board note this, and we would invite the board to attend one or more. Obviously, we would hope you can, if possible, attend your own community's meeting, but we would invite you to attend any of the others and get a feel for how the different parts of our 500 square mile community see these priorities. And I think that will help inform the final prioritization package that I'll talk about then when we bring that to you all. So we want to also note that at the Boulder High meeting, we're going to be having a Spanish translator, and so we're going to be working hard in our communications plan to inviting our Spanish-speaking community members to that meeting and weigh in with their thoughts at that particular meeting. So in summary, we want to say that we have some consensus that's bubbling up. And without getting too specific, which we'll present the specifics to you later, I would just give a hint to you that some of the things, and you wouldn't be surprised about these consensus items. Obviously, no matter what group we're talking to, people really want to talk about any construction or any capital improvement be sustainable and be thoughtful to our environment. That's real clear. We want to make sure that our learning spaces are comfortable. We all hear about what it's like to start school in the hot summer month of August and how that impacts teachers and students and staff. And what we've really adopted is we're going to have some proposal to the board that will involve some amount of air conditioning and univent work and bringing fresh air and lighting and all that. But it's not going to be a full, probably, as it looks right now, a full air conditioning all of our schools type of a recommendation, but we'll leave that to the board, further board discussion. But there is a conversation about how at some of our schools, especially those that have extended calendars, including summer school, that we really do need to provide an opportunity in the capital improvement plan to support those youngsters and teachers who are in school in the summer months. We have a huge amount of growth in East County. I think we talked a little bit about Louisville. I would add to that Erie and Lafayette. And so we're going to be presenting some options for the board to consider around how to deal with that growth. And I heard the board talk about that tonight. There's a lot of conversation and agreement about really entering all of our growth proposals and construction proposals around a 21st century environment that are flexible learning spaces, innovative learning spaces, taking full advantage of technology and best practices in education as we think about the space. And obviously, we're talking a lot about health and fitness, and that's something that Fran mentioned. That has broad consensus about how we support both our pre-K all the way through our 12th graders. And then we have some broad consensus around safety and security, things like having centralized and controlled access to our school buildings, similar to what we have here at the Ed Center. And then talking a little bit about how we provide for professional development for our staff. And that's something that our community and SIPSI has really gotten behind. So here's our timeline. We're in the March, we're prioritizing these needs. In April, we're going to go out to the community and pull it all together and create a master plan. In May, we're going to invite ourselves to work with the board, and we hope you'll accept our invitation. And we'd like to, Fran and I would like to join you with members of SIPSI and talk to the board about this master plan and really have you guys question and talk to us about our ideas. And then finally, we'd like to wrap all that up after that meeting with a final SIPSI presentation to the board in June. Fran?
It's been a lot of fun. We've learned a lot of things. We've heard from a lot of people. It's a very transparent process. We have much to be proud of with our buildings, and we have some ideas on how to innovate and how to upgrade since the last time we did a bond. I would really, really like to thank Don Orr and Susan Cousins. They are great bosses for us to have. When we start deviating off somewhere, they pull us back pretty good. So they're doing a super duper job. And Bruce has come to all the meetings. I don't know how he does it, but he's at all the meetings and the subcommittee meetings also, and has participated and is very involved in this whole process. And Bruce, we do appreciate your guidance at those meetings. And then finally, and we don't have them here tonight, but we have a whole crew of SIPSI volunteers that have been paddling through this for the past 8 or 9 months. And just a shout out to them, because they're very intellectual, they're smarter than Adam and I, and they're really informing the whole process. So we're happy to answer any questions. But the next couple of months, there'll be a lot of conversation.
Thank you very much. Sounds like it's time for some questions. Tina?
I just wanted to thank you so much for all this work, and I'm so excited about these community values meetings, and I really look forward to attending a couple of them. I would love to hear from the community how they feel about a some but not all air conditioning plan. That's
Right.
something that I saw in one of your updates, and I'm kind of wondering how people will react to that. So I really would love to hear more about
We're
that.
curious about that too. We're excited for that conversation. Of all of the topics that we have had as a subcommittee, air conditioning has been the most fun and challenging for us to facilitate, and I would anticipate at our community meetings, it would be the same at all community meetings. So you have your finger on the pulse of that particular subcommittee.
And the project managers have done a phenomenal job in collecting data and analyzing the data and analyzing all the buildings on the HVAC and the air conditioning, and there was an enormous amount of work that will inform that discussion for you all to have that discussion.
Okay. Tom? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo the great thanks that I have for you guys. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of big picture stuff. It's a lot of things that are details and certainly is eye-opening, I know, as you guys dig into that. I heard, Fran, you talked about deferred maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's something for us we look at on a daily basis, not daily, but, you know, on a regular basis, and that in our current budgets, our capital budgets are not adequate to sustain the maintenance we have, replacements we have like that. So it's an important part of this. And I'd like to echo that for the SIPSI group that, you know, we'll have a big hole if we don't address some of the deferred maintenance with this plan.
Tom, I want to echo that. The SIPSI has been updated about that, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time tomorrow night and then the following SIPSI on just that issue. And obviously, that isn't where they've spent most of their time up to this point. But now that we've been having the data, it's clear that that's a gigantic fund, and we will be hard-pressed to present to the board an option that you guys would feel comfortable with addressing all of the deferred maintenance, plus all of the growth, plus all of the fitness and health and wellness and the air conditioning. So obviously, what you're talking about is something that we have to spend a lot of time on and provide the board with some really clear options. options A through D or 1 through 4, however we want to look at it, so we can really dig deep into that. Because no matter what we present, we are very clear as the facilitators that it's a lot more than we even thought. And I made a joke in our first one that this bond could have needs of $1 billion. And if we were to address all of the deferred maintenance and all of the wonderful priorities, we would be in that world, you know. So we're going to have to pare that down for the board in a reasonable manner.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, to see how you prioritize those things. This sustainability is a big problem in that, you know, we can't sustain it. And,
Right.
and the more we add in terms of new capital facilities, the bigger that problem will get. So, you know, that's something we really need to address, and we've talked about it, and efficiencies go into part of that, as well as
Thanks, Tom.
as budgets to keep up. So thanks for doing that.
You should have facilitated these meetings. You nailed that one.
I'm sure you guys are doing a great job, much better than I could do. At any rate, you know, the community value meetings, that really resonated with me, because this is going to be a question about values, the values of the board, values of our community. There are a lot of great things that we can do. What are the most important things? We're not going to be able to find everything we'd like to do. And certainly in that regard, I'd like the board to start working with you guys even earlier than you suggest in May. And whatever we can do there, certainly I would like to be able to see some of the material that's going to be presented at these meetings beforehand. So at least when I go to the meetings, I have had a little chance to think about that, because I'm sure I'll get questions at the meetings as well. So anything you guys can provide, you know, prior to April 1st or so.
I got the nod from Don, so that's
Okay.
done.
Awesome.
We'll work with that. Would you?
Awesome.
So I'm assuming that you'd like to get some of that in early to mid-April is what you're suggesting?
Well, prior to the meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that at least I can.
Okay. By the end of the month.
Yeah.
Before the end of the month, actually.
Before the end of the month.
Okay.
And that way, you know, I'll be at the meetings, a number of the meetings anyway, but I'll get questions, I'm sure, afterwards, and I'd like to, you know, have a chance to look at those, and maybe even dialogue with the committee a bit, or you guys a bit about, you know, why the things are the way that you're recommending them. You know, it's going to be a process.
Right.
You know, as we know, and certainly we can work together, and hopefully we can work together,
Sure.
you know, more proactively. So thanks again for your hard work.
Our pleasure.
President Albright, if I could, before we move to other topics, I want to address the first point that Tom made about the ongoing deferred maintenance, the operational costs. I should have given this in the update, but I'm going to do it now because I think it's relevant, is that a week ago Friday, Chief Financial Officer Leslie Safford and I went to the Capitol and met with Representative Hamner and Senator Stedman. We had been working under Senate Bill 213 for a provision whereby we could go as a local levy to our voters to secure ongoing funding that would help move some of these very costs into an account that wouldn't compete in the general fund with other expenses you're very familiar with because of the very concerns that Tom expressed. And I would say it was a productive meeting. There were no promises, but Leslie did a great job representing. This is the issue, and it's a topic we've been working on for some time. We think it's a tool that, I mean, it would be local dollars. I mean, we'd love state match on it, but that's not what we were asking for. We were asking for another revenue stream, another avenue to do that. So we're not sure it'll come out in this session, but I think it is something we should continue to work on. And Senator Stedman had some good ideas of how we might continue this work. So I just wanted to let you know that this is really important work that Fran and Adam are describing, and we also recognize that probably it's not in our district's best interest to solve our deferred maintenance issues always through bond issues, because it really isn't the right match of a funding stream. So we'll continue to work on that, but it'll be really evident to you when you see this more detailed information about the need for what you're describing, Tom. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Jenny? Jenny? Yeah.
Okay, sure. Are we working with like local Adam, you'll know you'll be maybe sensitive to this issue. Are we working with local historical societies in case we're planning major renovations to any of our older buildings that might outrage?
You remember a previous bond.
I do.
Yeah. So if the board takes this measure and moves it forward towards a bond, what I would say to that is, we are going to defer that to the design advisory teams. And we've been working with Don and Susan to refine our design advisory teams and expand that design advisory team to include, which we did post haste in that last bond, we did bring in the historical societies and the preservation societies where in those communities where they had them. This time, we will add those in up front to the design advisory team. So part of the way we have to do that is because we have such different communities, is we have to make sure that the design advisory teams at all of the different schools are inclusive of those community members and the teachers and the faculty and the administration, et cetera. So that's the way we would like to address that through the design advisory team.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks,
Okay.
thanks for that answer, that clarification. And then there's one thing that, traffic, so we meet with city councils fairly regularly, and one of the things that always comes up is traffic mitigation. So I'm wondering if that's something that your committees are looking at as well, traffic issues around schools?
No, we've discussed transportation. That probably causes traffic, but traffic was not our charge, except as it would pertain to how cars, well, I guess we did look at it. The project managers would have looked at each individual school's drop-off and pickup,
that's what I was
and there may be recommendations on a different alternative or create a different parking lot.
Well,
so I guess we did look at
Yeah,
traffic.
part of it is in that deferred maintenance budget is these traffic patterns in the school campus. We did not have conversation as those campuses extend to the main streets and the thoroughfares that access them. We have not engaged in that as part of SIPSI.
No, but some of the capital stuff that affects
Correct.
that, the drop-off.
Paving
pickup,
and drop-off and pickup and circles and islands is part of what Don's team has already presented, and SIPSI will be wrestling with those things tomorrow night and at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. And I just like to comment on some of the deferred maintenance things, because while I agree that it would be great if, I'm all for doing whatever we can for our Boulder Valley students, in some ways it saddens me to think that I'm just really concerned that it only increases the inequality within our state, because we have some school districts like Boulder Valley that are capable of raising money through a bond to pay for, or for a mill to pay for this kind of thing, and a number of school districts where the need is probably much greater that have no way to raise money that way, and so it's not really on point to your topic, but I would say that the growing inequality, that the ongoing failure of the state legislature to fund public education is only going to create growing inequality in our district. And I think that we're all a state together, and that's not within our district, but we're all a state together, and that's just tragic and unforgivable.
Thanks. Anyone else? Sam? Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your work on this, and to everybody on the committee, and I appreciate the community values meetings. Can you say a little bit more about this executive committee prioritization process? That's a little opaque to me now.
I'll speak to that. The SIPSI committee has been primarily and is primarily a group of community volunteers with input on the subcommittees from directors and staff. As we have gone through that process, we recognized that we needed to be informed, or we needed guidance from members of Bruce's leadership team. We would hate to come and present a community plan that did not have the guidance and input from your leadership team. So we created a committee that brought the initial recommendations from SIPSI, with members of SIPSI, Adam and I and a couple of others participated, and members of cabinet, Bruce and Deidre, and I can't remember, Leslie was on that committee. So as we brought those recommendations, cabinet could say on on conversations around priorities, as they talked about your goals and values, some of the priorities may have, some of them did change in priorities as we were guided through a discussion. And I keep going back to fitness and wellness. There's a big difference between an athletic recommendation as it pertains to something very big and athletic than upgrading gymnasiums and rooms to accommodate many different exercises and things like that. And that was a priority from Bruce's leadership team. So that informed SIPSI, and we will take this information starting tomorrow and sift and sort and vet. Yes.
So Sam, a good example, a micro example would be one of the subcommittees had as a priority maybe having the concept of a centralized stadium. And it was important before they rated that as, it's already made it to the top 5, is that a 1, a 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, to talk to central staff and say, is there even room for that? Where would that occur? Is that something that transportation would support? So we had to vet some of those ideas. And in that executive committee were members of SIPSI, so they were represented by those heads of those subcommittees. And now that we've kind of, within those 1 through 5s, had a chance to get staff input, we can go back to SIPSI and say, here's their advice.
Yeah.
We will still make the final recommendation as a SIPSI, but they really wanted to know, is this even something the district would want? Because they're members of the community, and they hadn't had an opportunity to engage staff about where would this be. So that's one, but we had probably about 10 of those types of items around safety, professional development. That was another one, a micro example. Mm-hmm. Would that be at a central site, or would we develop sites in different parts of the district for staff development? Mm-hmm. And they really wanted to get staff input. Would they like it on this campus or at another campus? And it gave an opportunity for people in this room and a lot of others to weigh in. Mm-hmm. And those things are still in the priority, 1 through 5 or 1 through 8, but they might have moved from 2 to 4. And that's important, that when we present to you, that we give you an accurate reflection of what's really possible.
And thank you. And I would like more detail than we have here, and I'm assuming we're going to get, I look at 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's an implication that it was an even breakdown, but maybe 3 and 4 were pretty close together in priorities, and maybe they're not that expensive. I need that information along the lines of the air conditioning information, which is pretty good. I mean, I have a bunch more questions, but I'll hold those. So we're going to get a lot more. I'm just speaking as one board member. I need a lot more detail if I'm going to make a responsible decision on our priorities. So. I appreciate that you're trying to keep it compact. I don't want baskets necessarily, but specific dollars, comparisons, where they came out on a priority scale that's not just as simple as a 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
That will help me make an informed decision.
That will all be documented in a couple of binders. We're not binder ready yet, Sam, but there'll be a lot of tabs and a lot of appendices and a lot of data. So if there's a recommendation to provide air conditioning in one of our buildings, we can go to tab C, and the data will support what that recommendation is.
Great. And we'll also include things like operating costs based on current, wattage and things like that. So Don has been working really hard to provide that to SIPSI, so that there's the capital improvement plan and then the ongoing sustainability costs. And so we can really weigh those out when we present to the board.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other questions? My question had to do with preschool and full-day kindergarten. How have you been thinking about making sure that we have enough slots? Those are priorities of the board that we've been talking about. The possibility of full-day kindergarten. I have a sense that we don't have space. I don't really know. So how are you addressing that issue?
That issue, that's a great question, because that issue would be a perfect example of one that came before the executive committee. And in one discussion, that we support full-day kindergarten. I think it actually came to the top of the list. I don't know if I'm allowed to be saying those things, but so that was moved to the top of the list, and it's incumbent upon the staff to bring the information to answer your question. So now that if that's a big priority, then do we have the space? If we don't have the space, where are we building the space? which elementary schools have the space, which ones don't. And that was the level of discussion at that executive committee meeting. So it has been addressed, it has been discussed, it's on the list, it's a high priority on the list, and we will bring that forth through the recommendations.
So I think what you're talking about is full-day kindergarten, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what about the question about preschool? Are we, how are we thinking about where do?
What we have right now on that one is probably options for the board to consider, which is, which will be all schools, some schools. And the big issue of that won't be just construction, it will be operating costs ongoing, so that the board can weigh in on whether we go with option A, B, C, and D. And I see Don is
We got the hook.
right here, so,
Chomping at the bit.
yeah, jump in.
So I think, Laura, you're just way ahead of yourself. You'll see a plan. Right now, we're just quantifying need and deficiencies. So all of those issues, full day K, early childhood, and hundreds of others have been quantified, and we're in the process of now of assigning a cost to them. What would it cost to implement all of these deficiencies district-wide? CPSI will go back and they prioritize. Now, Sam, they'll have dollar amounts as of tomorrow night. We'll share that with the board as well.
Right.
That will influence how high up that line is drawn on what's included in a package and what's excluded. Ultimately, the work of CPSI is advisory to the board, and you'll have the benefit of polling data, public opinion surveys to help guide you, and our community engagement process to help guide you in finalizing the package. One response, Sam, on the executive committee, one intent on there was, as our chairs mentioned, we have a group of citizens that are volunteering their time. To date, we've had them focus on areas of specific interest to them. So we have 6 specific subcommittees that they've spent a lot of time collecting data on. Another reason for the executive committee is not to have one subcommittee pitted against another subcommittee. So we needed a sort of a sounding board, if you will, to look at these recommendations in total, prioritize, we'll identify must-haves for the district. There's things we just definitely have to do. You've talked about deferred maintenance. We can't support a lot of the programs we're talking about right now unless we invest in our buildings and extend the life of our buildings. So there's going to be a listing of things that have to be included in every package. And then and unfortunately, that's going to total a pretty significant amount. And then I think my analogy, CPSI goes and they spend the spare change. I mean, it's really pocket change, and they backfill in up to whatever the appropriate amounts are. And our thought is to perhaps give you 4 funding models separated by about $75 million in dollars, and those and you'll see what you get in package A. You're gonna get the minimum, and then package B you're gonna get the minimum plus $75 million more. And so ultimately CPSI and you will be able to draw that line on what's included in the package. Now, it's our hope that we give you a preferred alternative. CPSI makes a strong recommendation to you where they think we ought to go, and then you're influenced ultimately with, we've tried to keep CPSI out of the political arena, but you're influenced by public opinion to a greater degree. That help?
Yeah, it does. And this probably also is out of the realm of CPSI responsibility and focus. But what I'm just wondering how much we've been working with other organizations about early childhood and preschool, because a lot of our preschool funding is with outside organizations. And so I'm just wondering how as we're thinking about what the needs are for Boulder Valley, how some of those will be met by other organizations. And I'm also reminded, I mean, just to try to think about this a little bit, about the program that we did last summer in the housing, with the housing partners and Impact, Fran. And so are we thinking about those kinds of places for early childhood as we're planning?
So I'm just reiterate what Don said, is we need to let the process work. So we charged our SIPSI committee to do this work. Another reason we brought the executive committee together, so Sandy Ripplinger, who oversees early childhood, is a member of that executive committee, who works with Kim Blumen, who's our early childhood director, who works with all those organizations you just named. So that's the advantage of us bringing staff in at this point, because in case there were gaps or deficits, then we can help begin to fill that in, then bring it all together. So, I mean, we're still very much in process. I mean, Adam's right, we're getting close to spring. This is crunch time. But by design, it's crunch time. And so absolutely, we have not at the table always, but we have connections with them, and that's an important reason for us having staff involved. So
good.
So I
Sounds
think
good to
I'd
me.
add in closing, you know, that the difficult thing, and now all the deficiencies that have been quantified are legitimate. But it exceeds our ability to fund those. So the real challenge for SIPSI and ultimately the board and the community to weigh in is to set those values. You know, what should be included. We're trying to develop some criteria and guiding principles to help us with that. But look at consistency with our goals, mission, and
Value statements.
so, right. And so that's the difficult part. I mean, it's everything belongs on the list, everything. But as Adam mentioned, I mean, we're pushing about $900 million. We've done a very thorough job. The 2006 bond, we had 4 categories, just 4 general categories for close to $300 million. We've got 13 categories, so we're much more thorough in our analysis and way more in-depth in the data that we've gotten back. That's bittersweet. I mean, because we've got all this data, but now I think our challenge for SIPSI and the district is to educate the community regarding the needs of the district.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else on this topic? Well, thank you very much to Fran and Adam, working closely with Don. Thank you very much for your work, and please extend our appreciation to the committee, the members.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It's
Lori.
very impressive, the work that you brought forward.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
And we will share that tomorrow
We will
night.
see you soon.
Yeah.
Very soon.
I
Hold
guess
your breath.
Later on in April. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is an informational item on the budget guiding principles and priorities, and they were in our packet. And we're not voting on these, but we're just having a review. Is that right?
yes,
Bruce?
so in your packet, under an information item, close to a month ago, I suppose, we had a work session at the end of a meeting. We gathered and talked about these. You provided some insight and some input. Executive Director of Budget Services, Bill Sutter, is near the podium. He took liberty to make a few edits to reflect that conversation that evening. So we bring it back to you as an information item. The last few years, you've used this to kind of help guide the process, and obviously they're yours to alter now or in the future, and they reflect the conversation we believe that we had that evening together. So if you want it edited further, I'm sure Bill would be glad to do that. But really, we just bring it back to you as kind of a next step. We have future meetings scheduled to do budget review and discussion as a part of our spring budget development process. But that's what you have in the packet. And I think Bill or I or others would be glad to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you. Board members, any comments or questions? Anyone? Well, to me, looked pretty good as a summary and a compilation of what we talked about before. And I think it fairly well reflects both what we've done with some small updates for this year in terms of the budget priorities. Tom? Sure. Oh, sure, please.
So,
I
you know, I
hear.
looked through all these, they look like, you know, great guiding principles, and I wanted to discuss a few minutes for some of the ones that are said they're on the table for future discussions. This is, I think,
Okay.
a good time to do that. This idea of class sizes or student-teacher ratios has been discussed at length for many, many years. Tina recently sent out some more information that seems to contradict some of the studies. I think that would be worth some time having some discussion on, or perhaps an information item, and follow up on some of that, because that's also germane to some of these discussions we have about class sizes. I hear from parents and teachers all the time about class sizes and their empirical information that from their experience about that does make a difference in the time that they can spend. But putting that aside a little bit, one of the commitments that we have tried to make as the budgets have been cut over the last few years is that we would try to restore, as we got funding back, try to restore where we were before those budget cuts. And in fact, when we went for the mill levy override that our taxpayers were so generous with, that helped us to get through these hard times. But one of the commitments we made is that we would restore, cuts. One of the cuts that we did make during that time period was on ratios. So we cut by a factor of 1. I believe, Bill, was that the number? Yeah, cut by 1. We were able to add a half back, so we're still a half short from what we were. And so that's what I would like to suggest, as particularly if funding goes around relative to restoring some of the negative factor. I think that's a very important thing that we ought to consider. If we can't otherwise figure out how we do it within the School Finance Act outside of that money, we should certainly be true on our commitment to the voters that we said we would restore those funding cuts. And that would be one that I would be strongly in agreement with, that we restore back to where we were before. I think we still need to have future discussions around the value of class sizes and the values of our community and how that impacts learning. But having said that, I think our commitment to the voters really requires us to restore that. So I would put that high on the priority list, and particularly if we do get that negative factor reduction funding.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
So,
Jenny, please.
so is it something you'd put on the priority list if we had new money coming in, or are you saying that we should look around for cuts elsewhere?
Well, I think it's going to be a value judgment, Jenny, as to we have a certain amount of money. What's the most important place we put it? I think it should be on the list of one of those things we look for to see if we can do that, and look at the balance of other competing programs and expenses that we do have. But certainly if we get funding for 1292,
Yes, 1292.
I would put that high on the list for that 1292 money.
So it's fair to say it's primarily if we get new money, or,
No,
no?
no, I would say definitely if we get new money. And I would say we need to have the value conversation even if we don't.
Well, that's sort of what this is then. So, okay. So do you have any things that we're funding now that are less valuable that,
I think as we go through the budget process, that's what we should discuss.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anyone else? No?
Oh.
Jenny?
So I have another question. It's about public input. I mean, it looks like we've got a lot of public input around SIPSI planned for this spring. Do we also have, and one of our values is that we get feedback from, that we engage the community in budget discussions. So I'm wondering how we're envisioning doing that this year.
So we presented in December a timeline that had the budget development process. That too has been around about as long as these guiding principles have been. And if you can't find it, just let us know. We'll resend it. It has those dates scheduled as to when there would be board discussion, work session, also time for public input. So, and what we talked about when we refreshed that or looked at it again in the late fall, winter, was that if, as we get in the process, if we think there's need for additional times, we can add those. But those are embedded through the budget development process. And, so for example, if we would have additional resources that we haven't had before that aren't obligated to ongoing costs, so there might be proposals, and then if not this year, in the future, and then that might be an example of a time we would solicit public comment around either proposals or seek public proposals. But that's built into the timeline, Jenny, for the budget development process, and so it's on that long spreadsheet that Bill prepared for us. But yes, we do plan to seek public input. Thanks.
Does that include an electronic thing like BVSD lessons for that piece?
So I don't think we specifically identified that, but we certainly have used that before. And so I think that's, yes, absolutely we could. Maila's always looking for topics. I think soliciting, and particularly if we're trying to prioritize or if there are competing interests that we're talking about, what's really convenient about that process forum is that you can put it out for a pretty quick window, frame up the question, and leave it open-ended also. So yeah, absolutely. It doesn't specifically reference that, but that would be one of the tools that we have used and would make sense. Again, I think it's just we need to always be thoughtful about what question are we asking, and is it input we can use, and not create false expectations. And I guess I'd be a little cautious about asking for assistance on how to spend abundant new resources that we're going to receive until we're confident we're going to get some new resources. And but yes, it's a tool that we've had some success with.
And actually, just as a follow-up to Tom's comments about the ratios, have we asked teachers how their experience has changed since the ratios were changed to find out what their experience has been?
So, no, I don't think we have to answer your question directly, Tina. Not in that way. Part of the nuance with this is that, probably no two teachers over time have a set of experiences that allows them to answer that question. So on one given year, if you're an elementary teacher, you might have 20 or 21 in your class. And then the next year, because of the group size, you might have 27 in your class. And so, and it's a different group of children. And if you teach some electives, you'd have under 20 in your class. If you teach some other areas, you might have over 30 in your class. So I think I'm thinking of a research question around that, is that if a teacher teaching a common class over time and they personally experienced a change in class size for algebra or biology, and it really did change with, then you could maybe do some comparative analysis. It's just that we have, even with a set index, and we have an index that we use to start our staffing protocol, it's an average. And so we'll see significant swings. Just by the nature of it, because you have one year you can do 3 sections of 4th grade, the next year you have to go to 2 because that's where those numbers are. So you might really go from low 20s to upper 20s in the same building. I don't think we have asked that question, and I don't know that we have very good data from a teacher's perspective on that, just to be fair. Certainly we could solicit a lot of opinions on it, I'm quite sure, and we'd get feedback.
Thank you. Shelley?
Do we have, I'm sure we have some understanding, but do we have any, data might be too strong, but what's your feeling about which types of classes and which age groups are more sensitive to class size? Like when I look at high school, I think, wow, those English teachers, when you add an extra student, you add a lot of extra work. Whereas in some other classes, that may not be the case. There might not be that much impact. So if we had a better understanding of that, or some understanding of that, we could maybe target if we want to reduce class size in those places that make the most sense. And I'm just wondering if you have any idea about what that might look like.
Well, there is conflict in the research. So the article that Tina shared with the board would indicate some differencing perspective on that. I think the 2-decade-old longitudinal research around class size, really the greatest benefit is targeted with the youngest children. So that's a group. So preschool and early grades primarily. The other is populations that just demand more attention because of their learning needs. So that could be special education. Obviously, we invest heavily in special education for the reasons you understand, but that's really high intense need. And then our intervention around literacy, English language learners, those are areas we invest significantly in above the average class because those are children who benefit from that intense intervention both in their classroom, to adults maybe, and or pull-out programming that does that intention. So our models probably reflect a lot of what the research shows about that. Now, to your point, Shelley, about, so let's just take high school English. So if having students write and receive feedback on their writing over time is important to us as a part of the development of the writing process, which some of us would believe it is, then if you have class sizes that are on the high end over time, well, one, the teachers will spend a lot of hours on that, and they invest a lot of time and energy, and it could impact the number of writing frequencies for students. The state I left, they actually had an accreditation standard. I'm not proposing this because it was really cumbersome and difficult to manage, that English class sizes, the high school couldn't exceed 20 on the average because they were promoting the writing process. And so they wanted that high school English teacher in that setting to have the ability to frequently prescribe writing activities and be able to do feedback loops on it. So, I mean, so, yeah, there is some, probably some common sense kinds of things that we would think of. I think our struggle is with inadequate funding in our state. We enjoy as good a class size as any of our peer districts in BVSD. We've been doing some interviewing for assistant superintendents, and we've had the opportunity to learn more about our neighboring peer districts. And we enjoy some things that they don't, and they enjoy some things we don't. It's how they prioritize their dollars. So that doesn't make it right. It only makes it our reality when we have inadequate funding as a state. It is symptomatic of what occurs over time. Jenny mentioned it on capital improvements. I mean, there's just a list. So some of the things we probably would like to do around targeting class sizes or interventions, it's just going to be difficult to do in our present financial situation. But I think it's something we should always be conscious of. I mean, our problem is if we were to bring all of our English class sizes down in our secondary schools to 20 or less, that would push some other class sizes probably well over 40 to do that, just because we can't bring in more resources right now. So, I mean, that's just one of our challenges. But clearly there are some examples like that that we could talk about. We've worked to keep our primary grades lower on the average than our intermediate grades and the grades above. But it's becoming increasingly difficult to do.
So in the example that you just gave about English and keeping the class size at 20, did they see any results from that effort?
Yes, I think we did. I don't have any comparative result to what we're seeing because we have some exceptional performance in this district as well. Within the state where we did do that comparative data, it wasn't just the class size. The other part of the accreditation was professional development. We developed a high school writing assessment that was for college admission. And so it was multifaceted. I would say some of the quality added aspects of writing that we did in the state contributed to that overall success, which those wouldn't have been possible without the class size. So it was that in combination. It alone, I don't believe would have. I mean, and just so you know, we had some of our own issues that we had to go in with high school English teachers and say, no, the expectation is that you have students write this many times a semester. You can't have class sizes of 20 and have them not write. That's the point, is they're supposed to, so, there's a quality control piece around that as well. It wasn't just the class size. It was a number of other things that occurred in a strong formative feedback loop around writing assessment, peer-to-peer writing samples that we collected and had a valid, reliable reviews on. So it was a multifaceted approach. But the class size contributed to our ability to do that.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that was great.
We should think about it.
Any other comments or questions for Bill?
Got his picture.
Bruce? Great. Well, thank you very much.
Keep it in
for
front of us.
This discussion, and Tom will talk about the issues about class size as we get to the budget. Get a little further on.
Yeah, and again, we interchange class sizes with ratios, and they're not really the same.
Right.
Fair enough.
And ratios, when we did cut, I'm glad we had the discussion here. We didn't just cut across the board. What we did is try to cut from things that weren't working well.
Yeah.
And so my expectations, if we were to change the ratios back up by half, we would try to target areas to be most productive and most value added as well. Sure. So rather than, just saying all classes are this size, let's, be a little bit more
Nuanced.
intelligent. Yeah.
Good. Okay, thanks. The next item on our agenda are action items for consent grouping, and I'll read them. Personnel items, approval of minutes, February 25th, 2014 regular meeting, acceptance of donation Whittier Elementary, award of contract at Broomfield High School for their turf replacement, award of contract for replacement of turf at Fairview High School, cancel the meeting of the school board meeting of March 25th, 2014, electronic participation in the school board meetings policy BEAA, and enrich online assessment and instructional profile system. Do I have a motion to approve? What?
Motion.
We need a motion first, and then we'll pull items that we want to vote on separately or that we have questions about. So, Tina's moved. Is there a second? Jenny, second. Okay. Do any board members have any items that they would like to pull? Because we want to vote on it perhaps differently.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, sure, ask the question. And right.
I just, on the enrich online assessment and instructional,
Profile system.
so is that the is that the contract one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Does, in the scope of work, does that include the evaluation data that's going to be coming out of the pre-K? I saw the word gold, and does that refer to the gold standard test?
Yes, so the readiness assessment that will be required to do, all school districts will be required to do in Colorado. The gold is one of those that's been approved. But any data we'd collect, that would be an example of how we would upload that data.
Yeah.
And it would be stored in the system so that, say they took it in preschool, then the kindergarten teacher could access it, or first grade if it was, so it would be, we can sort it by class, by individual, by school.
Okay.
So yes, the
And-
gold assessment data would be included.
And how many districts and schools are using it, districts are using it in Colorado?
The gold?
No, the,
Oh, the enrich.
yeah.
They're all using it on on the special ed side. That's the state standard for that. So Ron, I don't know in your discussions on this, I don't know that I know how many school districts in Colorado are using Enrich. We do know some are because we've had conversations with them, but I don't know if you have a sense of that.
Good evening, Board. Tina, your question. Yeah, actually, I don't have a number that's using Enrich. Just as Bruce alluded to, many of them, almost all of them are using it for special ed, so that'd be 178. We know that besides ourselves, Cherry Creek, Aurora, I'm trying to think of some of the other larger districts that have kind of come on board to use it in the manner that we want to use it. So those represent large districts. I don't know that Jeffco is using it, but certainly in the Denver metro area, there's 3 or 4 that give us confidence about the nature of the work that we're doing with it. Yeah.
Thanks, that's all I had.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Tom?
Yeah, about Enrich as well. So I know we've been using Enrich for, like you mentioned, special education, individual education plans for,
Right.
what, a year and a half now or so?
A
Something
little over
like-
a year, yes, I think.
Little over a year, yeah. And I know what I hear is a vast improvement over Infinite Campus when we were doing it
Right.
that way. Now, I also understand that there are companion programs to Enrich. Is that what we're talking about, some of the companion programs that do actual assessments, like reading assessments? Or is this just the portion of Enrich that does the other plans like you discuss here in the item?
I'm sorry, Tom, I'm going to have to, if I got all of your question,
Okay.
and forgive me about that. So I guess if I understood it.
I asked
we
more
have
than one question there, sorry about that.
So the question in terms of the types of plans that we're gathering really are a reflection of all the different state legislative reporting requirements we have to meet.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is package them in one place, and for the data that we would provide, can populate these plans pretty evenly without
teachers having to go through lots of different steps. That's really the end game that we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so that's basically this product right here. And I understand that, and I know the difficulties with Infinite Campus now trying to do that.
Correct.
So that's a great plan. My question involved around there's some companion products by the same company that actually do assessments, such as reading assessments. And I didn't know if we were trying to package some of those in as well.
Well, I guess I'd say, I with respect to Accent,
Yes.
yeah,
I
I'm not.
couldn't remember the name.
Yeah, I'm not actually aware of other companion products. We did ask them whether they had any work on the educator effectiveness product and this type of thing. While they have interest, they're about 12, 15 months down the road before they're going to get into it. So I think we're following a different path. And Shelley Landgraf could speak more to that if I'm tracking with your questions. Is that helpful?
Right. Yeah, that was what I was talking about, that particular product.
Yeah.
The follow-up question, though, the packages we'll be adding here, have we looked at some of the other school districts? Are they using those? Are they happy with them? Do we have any information there?
It seems like Aurora has taken the lead on this, so it is in advance of us. So actually, we actually had a meeting with a gentleman from Enrich this morning to talk a little bit about the nature of the development of our particular forms that we would like to have. And so, what he is proposing, and sounds like a good idea, having some of the participating districts come together to see if there's some similarities that we can do. First of all, it would help to have then the different plans being able to talk to each other when we release, if we were to release the information. If a student were to leave our district and go to another participating district, if you will, or vice versa. So that's kind of how that's working. But so I guess I'd say Aurora seems to have the greatest, has done the greatest work on this. Cherry Creek and ourselves are kind of coming on simultaneously, pending your approval, of course. But I'm trying to think of it seems like there's one or two other significant districts that are also coming on board about the same time. So we're trying to coordinate our work.
Okay, so Aurora seems to be happy with it, or do they have recommendations for enhancements, so on and so forth?
I'd say, happiness is a relative thing. Even they would say nothing's perfect. And so I think it's certainly superior to where we are right now. And, they've made every willingness to customize things to the way that we need them. And I guess as we work with other districts, that's the part where we need to kind of work with each other, because if we go too far off a different path, then it doesn't give us some other type of flexibility that we're desiring. So those are kind of, I think, some of the trade-offs. But I think we're feeling good about where we're at.
Okay, and financially feel like it's a good investment, that there's some upfront costs, but then there's recurring costs associated with that. And the recurring costs are, look good for us for the out years. We plan to stick with this product for at least foreseeable future.
Well, I think we laid out about a 3-year plan, and so that was sort of the window we had looked at. I mean, there are several other things going on. So we had a lot of conversation around this, and one was just to wait. But we do feel like we've been waiting for a long time, waiting for maybe a more perfect solution. And so that's not a discredit this solution. It's just that I've been in conversation with the commissioner, and others have been too, is, could we consider a state solution like we did in special ed? We're not getting much traction on that. That conversation's been going on for 2 years. So it's part of that is just to say, this will be a significant benefit to our schools. It's really cumbersome, our present system. So sometimes the data is just not retrieved. So we go through a process of collecting information, but it's so cumbersome to get it back. Then it feels like it really has no utility then. Plus these read plans that we need to start preparing. So our belief is, and expectation, this will streamline some of the work. It'll create greater access and opportunity for teachers and principals in the building, and it's a good next step. I don't think we would say, we'll continue to look, because its upfront cost is some, and then the licensing fee is $137,000 a year. There's no indication in the marketplace that we would do anything less expensive than this. And so a more robust solution, probably would be a bigger commitment. So I think we're just kind of letting this go for a bit. We're waiting to see the new assessments, but we think it's a necessary next step. And we did debate whether we should take this step now, but we've been having this conversation for over a year, and we decided that if we're going to do it, we should just get going with it, because it does take some training, which we'll do this spring and summer, and then, be ready in the fall. The READ Act is new, so the students who are identified to have a READ plan, it's the logical time for us to do it. And then the other plans that were noted in your notes are plans that exist that we can begin to roll into those. But as much as anything is that, if we have that gold assessment, so everybody has their own data system. So if you jump from one to the other, but the reality is classroom teachers are pretty busy, and so this dashboard, the easier we can make it for them to access information or input information, then easier for our instructional leaders and coaches and principals to be able to query data so they can go back with staff. I mean, they do a lot of that longhand right now, but IC was really never designed to do this. It's just the wrong tool. We made it work a little, but it's pretty cumbersome. And so this will just, I think Ron's being careful not to say this is as good as sliced bread, because we don't think it is, but we think it's a vast improvement and will help us build the bridge to where we need to go. And then we'll continue to look. And the part of our analysis was Andrew Moore and his team working with our staff, our curriculum staff, and Ron, was really, part of this is having systems talk to each other. So the conversion of data, the transfer of data, so because most of these assessments are different vendors. And so, you got to get it to, that's what we had IC trained to do, was to call for that. But then how do you pull that data into another system so you can manipulate it? So anyway, I just think this is, a really good start for us. And I think it, obviously we think it's worth the money and the time, or we wouldn't be recommending it. But we also will leave the door open to continue and so we can probably tell of more failures than success stories. Some of our larger peer districts in the Denver metro area have tried to design on their own, and that can be really costly. And so, hiring a programmer and doing all this, and we just feel like this is a better option, as a plan that, and I think the user group that Ron described with our peer districts, we have the company reps seem very willing to work with us as a district, and I think, so if we wanted some customization that would work, because we're doing some of the same things across districts, and using some of the same assessments across districts, that some of that customization we may be able to have built in over time and add value to the system.
So if I understand you correctly, it'll obviously help us in our reporting requirements.
Absolutely.
Be able to get to the data, produce the reports a lot easier than we're doing now, less time. But I also thought I heard you say that'll allow us to get at more data, actually to do more easier data analysis. Is that correct?
To access it, yes.
To access it, okay.
So if you wanted to do a comparative analysis against different data sets, you could retrieve them, do queries on them, and look at them. What it's not is it's not a statistical package.
Okay.
It doesn't do that. It really is a data management system.
The database system.
It's a database system.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, with multiple ports of entry for it.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions on the consent grouping? Okay, Shelley, please.
What's the life of turf?
Field turf. Don Orr? Don? Shelley's question was, what's the life of our field turf, kind of on the average? We're replacing two fields that's...
12 years. Like carpet wears out.
It's very expensive.
It's expensive.
$40,000 a year, something like that. You're paying about $400,000 for turf, right, or $300,000?
Just under 300.
Yeah, so.
So you factor in mowing, fertilizer, pesticides, striping. Our maintenance costs are way down. It pays for itself in maintenance in about eight and a half years.
Uh-huh.
It's not offline due to inclement weather.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
So
I
this,
wasn't questioning whether
just so
it's-
you know, the funding for this is surplus from 2006 bond money.
Yeah, I assume that, otherwise it would be a SIPSI expense, right?
What was that?
It would be a SIPSI expense otherwise, right? I mean, it's already covered in the prior bond.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thanks. I wasn't questioning whether it's a good idea, I was just wondering how long it lasts.
Yeah, I think the
So-
payback that Don mentioned is one of the things, because in SIPSI discussion, there has been conversation about increasing the number of fields like this that might be multi-purpose fields just because of green space and things. And so there is a place where we've had conversation, you may well have conversation in a couple of months about where that utility drops off. But clearly, where we have these, they're heavily used, and for the reasons Don described. But it doesn't make sense to do it probably, everywhere. And so like elementary playgrounds, for example, although I'm not saying we would never consider that, because there are some of these very same issues in maintaining those play areas as well, so. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Sure. Tom?
Don, before you sit down.
Don?
Don, quick one.
You just thought you were
Sorry,
getting
I wanted to catch you walking back. No, not really. No, as I recall, during the flood, we damaged some turf. Is this in addition to that, replacement of some of that turf? I thought at Monarch we had some damages.
No, these are two sites. So 2 years ago we replaced Boulder High.
Right.
So 2 years ago we replaced Boulder High. So these are just up for a replacement cycle. We're fortunate in that we had some surplus to address the need. We put Broomfield was supposed to be done last year. That field was damaged with heavy wet snow, and our maintenance equipment had damaged it. We had an insurance settlement, so
that's what I was thinking
Monarch
about.
sort of bumped Broomfield.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got the cycle now with Broomfield now, with Fairview coming this summer beginning. Very competitive bid, a very high standard field, similar to Boulder. We probably get a little bit more life out of them than what the industry projects. But as we build these, it gets back into the deferred maintenance. The budget should, we're fortunate now because I have the money to do two, but our cap reserve budget should be funded I'm making a little pitch here, should be funded adequately, so we have these on a regular cycle, replacement cycle, that if we were to have to do multiple fields in a year, the cap reserve budget could not absorb that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Yes.
Belleville.
Yes.
Benford.
Yes.
Fuqua.
Yes.
Marquis. Myers.
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next item on our agenda is an action item. It's a Board Resolution 14-04, which is to urge creation of the Standards and Assessment Task Force concerning implications of Colorado's statewide assessment system for classroom instruction. So we have before us a resolution. Do we need a motion first? Do we have a motion to approve this resolution? Tina, second by Shelley. Discussion. We also discussed this last week, so there may not be any other questions, but are there any questions?
Well, I would just add, so what's probably obvious to you is we pulled language from the study committee and embedded it in your resolution so that it, as best can, parallels that. We've also been really clear with our lobbyists, your position on this. I think I've copied you on most of that correspondence. They're tracking this really closely. We've shared this resolution broadly with other districts, so some have asked for copies of it. So we just want to be sure there's enough momentum behind this as it makes its way through the House and Senate that you get the governor's support late in the session. So Ernestine just texted me this afternoon. There was discussion at the State Board of Education meeting around the West Ed review, which is referenced in the study, plus this work, and so the state board had some conversations. So our sense is this will get support through the legislative process, and we will actively pursue involvement if that happens, maybe membership, but if not membership, certainly participation and provide input. So we appreciate the discussion we had a few weeks ago, and we think this resolution, if you approve it this evening, will just give us a little more traction as we continue to work in this session and beyond. So we've been trying to communicate this as this will just give us another piece. So thank you.
Great. Okay, are there any comments or questions? Okay, Sandy, please call the roll.
Albright.
Yes.
Belleville.
Yes.
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. The next item on our agenda is a study item, the District Unified Improvement Plan, and it looks like Jonathan's at the table.
Dr.
Bruce?
Jonathan Dings is at the podium, Chief of Planning and Assessment, and he and Ron Cabrera are taking lead and working closely with DAC this year, and we're primary authors, I would say, of this UIP with a lot of input from others. So, Jonathan.
Thank you. So before you have a relatively long plan, but it's shorter than what you've had in the past. That is due in very large measure to feedback we've gotten in the past from DAC about having the plan focus. What I would share are just some sort of high points here. That we've built the plan from data, and the part that we focused on hasn't been the part that paints Boulder Valley students overall as achieving relatively high scores and achieving relatively high growth, but we've focused much more on the pieces where there are indications of need. Our biggest areas of need are around the kind of gains that are being made by particularly students who are served through special education, who are English language learners, or who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. What the plan does is tries to lay out the data that we have and make the case for two main overarching strategies that we've in some ways been working on in the past and would certainly expect to in some measure be working on in the future. Those are particularly around literacy and mathematics. And if you want to hear more about those, I'm sure Ron would like to answer any questions that you have. But you've seen this plan, you've seen DAC's review of it, and there were recommendations that we would be taking into account next time. And we're ready to answer any questions you want to ask of us.
Board members, are there any questions? Please, Bruce.
I don't have a question, but I would just add to Jonathan's comments, again, just to repeat what you know already, is that this will probably be the unified improvement plan that will, the last one that won't be significantly influenced by our strategic planning process. It would be my expectation in this conversation a year from now, and through the course of the year, getting to a year from now, that you'll begin to see how the work of our action teams and around the goals that you approved last June will begin to add some color to this, and obviously some of it will parallel work that's in here as you read through it, but there'll be some other areas. So we're looking forward to that, and I think District Accountability Committee is looking forward to that as well. So I just wanted to make a note of that because we've talked for a couple of years about getting to this point. So I think we're right on the eve of that happening.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments? Tom? Thanks.
So I was at the DAC meeting and went around between the various groups as you did as well. Both of you guys did, hearing the various comments and so on. And then I guess Laura Hale and the exec committee sort of summarized these into this five major areas. I'm wondering what your comments are on their recommendations and how you might incorporate those, or where you think it's not necessary.
Well, I would open by saying these are all valid, well thought out comments, and I think that in thinking about next year's plan, it's absolutely worth looking at. For instance, the matter of have we come far enough from the last time that there was relatively good external data on what root cause might be. Will we have come next year to the point where we would invest more effort in gathering a little of that, and perhaps in that way not lean as much on some of the logic that we had. For example, some of the things we're going forward doing more of are things around literacy, which is an area where we have seen some improvement of late. So to answer, I think these are all valid points, and they'll all be worth thinking about that we have. Dr. Cabrera, did you have more?
Thanks, Jonathan. I guess I would add, Tom, and you and I had some conversation around this.
Yes.
There are several items here that actually, their recommendations we're actually doing.
Okay.
As an example, they want to have this UIP be connected to the strategic plan, and as Dr. Messenger indicated, that's clearly his vision as well. But in fact, the areas around literacy and mathematics are two key leverage points of this particular plan, and you might recall they're within the focus area of learning that had been shared with you from the strategic plan steering committee. So that wasn't actually by accident. We had some intentionality behind that. So obviously, I think there are points here that they have worthiness to it. I think that some of the areas that they've identified that maybe they want a little bit more detail around, say, special populations and the like, we have a common interest in that, because I think if we can identify that data, obviously that will help us monitor the progress in closing the achievement gap, and I think that's one of our common interests as well. So.
Okay, great. So, you know, I would encourage you guys to get back with DAC and tell them some of the stuff you told me, that, yeah, you're spot on, and the goal next year is to actually have a real close tie with the strategic plan. That's one of the things, and how the root cause analysis can be maybe a little bit more robust, and where you are actually incorporating some of their feedback. I think that would be very valuable to them, and you know, in also fairness, they were very complimentary that last year's comments, a lot of those were incorporated, and they made a point of saying that. So I think that's good feedback, and it's important to know that for them to know that their inputs, you know,
Sure.
are actually being heard, and we're doing something about them, because I think they are valuable.
We agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Tina?
So thinking about the plan for next year, I looked at this plan and there's the focus on literacy and math. But then when I go through the focus areas and workbook groups from the strategic plan under learning, there's a lot outside of that that's obviously not in this plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that this is really for the CDE. Should we expect to see this 4 or 5 other working groups' outputs with their benchmarks and goals incorporated into this document, or will we just pull the literacy and math out and put it in this document? Does that make sense?
So, so I don't have at this time a very good answer that will do literacy, math, and three other things. I think we'll need to see what seems to best meet CDE's requirements and needs, but also, you know, how will we make good calls about what effort we want to put in crafting this plan versus the effort we put into making the work that's being done overall for Boulder Valley more apparent, and that to our audience broadly. So I guess the short version of that answer is probably stay tuned. It's a good thing for us to be thinking about.
Yeah, because this plan, you know, the CDE one, it doesn't sound like it would meet our goal as a district of an individual lifelong curious learner. You know, this is pretty limited. So I'm really looking, obviously, I think like everyone, I'm looking forward to the strategic plan.
So if I could restate what I think I'm hearing you saying, Tina, the strategic plan ought to be the guiding document for our district.
I'm not going to say that yet.
All right, that's what I was that's what I was getting inference.
Yeah, it should, but I don't know how it fits with this yet.
So, you know, there's a lot of times, just based on my own experience, and speaking only from my own experience, not from Boulder Valley, oftentimes the things that we think that are the most important work of the district don't often coincide with what CDE has asked us to report on. So it captures a piece of our work. Sometimes it's completely divergent, but obviously we're required to speak to those performance requirements and that type of thing. It's not that we're ignoring them, but we believe that there's a good complementary relationship here. But the larger plan, the strategic plan, I think it's the vision that if we're going to move our district forward, is really our intent to meet those particular requirements, and we'll include CDE's requirements along the way, but it's larger than this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I could, Lori, before we leave that, I see the UIP as a compliance requirement. And that's the utility it has for us, so we can remain accredited. But what Ron just said is, I think we understand your vision, and ours is different than that. So we'll do what we need to do to comply. so we can maintain our accreditation. But we won't realize what we want to as a district if we're limited by this format and this expectation. I mean, some of what happens around accreditation in our state and other states is they set minimum thresholds out of fear that people won't do it or they aren't doing it or whatever reason. But, you know, it probably never really totally applied to our district and certainly won't as we go forward. So I think, but to your point, Tina, I think in the fall we'll wrestle with this some about, you know, how do we do this? Because as important as the content is the lifeblood of the document, because we are not convinced that the UIP was a driver around emotion or motivation or work at the district or the school level. It was a compliance requirement. And so we really do want the strategic plan to be much more than that. We really want it to be what people are excited about because they helped co-create it, our community as well as our staff. So to us, it's more than just a report. I mean, what we're working on and the level of involvement you've heard about, and we'll continue to build on that. So I mean, again, I think that's your vision, and it certainly is ours as well. So anyway, we'll obviously submit a UIP because that's a compliance requirement, and they'll complement each other, just like Ron and Jonathan said, for sure. But, you know, I guess I just want to plant that seed again that we'll come back and talk more about this later, but we really see the strategic plan being a far more visionary and inclusive document than we might see in a UIP. So.
Shelley?
I think what you just said about the UIP being a compliance document is very true. However, the one thing that's very good about it, I think, is that it does ask the district to examine root causes of things. And that's something we need to carry over somehow, even if we discount the value of this document. And I think that's what Dak was saying quite clearly. And my question is, how exactly are we going to do that? Because to me, that is the most important thing we can be doing here, is understanding what's causing the gaps that we're seeing and what's causing the lack of improvement that we're seeing. And I think I sat here almost 2 years ago and said that when I was at Boulder High on the SAC, I insisted on trying to understand why boys' reading scores were lower than girls' reading scores. And I did that by interviewing the boys. And I got really valuable information. And that's the kind of level you need to go to understand root causes. And I would really like to know how the district's going to do that. I mean, in every situation. It can't be just somebody in an office saying, well, I think the root cause is this. True. It can't be. Otherwise, you'll be solving the wrong problems.
Agreed.
So, as you know, Shelley, this is big and complex, and we'll probably answer that question a piece at a time, because the reality is we have lacked valid and reliable data in some areas, maybe forever, but for a long time. So some of the readiness assessment, our earlier conversation about Enrich, we need to better understand where our learners start with us and what kinds of things we do that improve that readiness and success, and what things that we're doing that aren't. And that's absolutely rich conversation that's going on right now within our preschool community based on data we're collecting. And so that's a piece. Under the READ Act, not all parts of it do we agree with, but we will have and continue to have a deeper understanding around literacy within our students and we now have a better understanding of what interventions we're using that are making a difference, so they have the competency and skill. That's just a part of it. The new mathematics work that we're doing right now, so we're anxious to see what the Park assessment will tell us, because we have some idea. But so some of this is a matter of getting the right informal and formal assessment tools in place and to conduct that analysis. So it's a combination of things, and it's absolutely what we're committed to do. So it isn't just our less than proficient learners that's obviously a high target area for us, but it's also, as consistent with our vision and mission, is maximizing the learning for all students. So they might be a proficient reader, they just might not be motivated to read. And so, and we know that it's more than just skill-based, competency-based things. It's motivation, it's engagement, it's all the things we talked about last year when we worked on the goals that's leading the strategic plan. So I think, we're just committed to continue to find ways to do that. And you're right, it's not studying a spreadsheet in an office. It really is about collecting real data in the field. One of our concerns, which is consistent with this resolution you just approved around the study, is finding that right balance. If we take all of our time and energy to do compliance around state mandated standardized measures, which have some value. But if it takes all of our time and energy, or much of it, and it doesn't have as great a value as more informal assessments or other ways we collect data that help inform our day-to-day decisions with students or year-to-year decisions in-house, that's a worry we have. And I'm hoping that this study will help our state board and legislature help us as a state find that balance. And I'm not blaming anybody for this. I mean, we have our own work to do around root cause analysis. But, we have not probably done as much in collecting and analyzing local data as we could and should. And I worry that, again, if we spend a lot of our time and energy in a compliance mode around state measures, to date, those have not been very helpful. The TCAP, the CSAP are not particularly helpful to answer the question you're asking. It is what it is. And so, anyway, it's obviously a big discussion.
I couldn't agree more that those assessments aren't that valuable. But I think that what I'm talking about is something that has more to do with leadership at the schools. Like, there needs to be a real focus from the leader on trying to figure out what's going on in that person's school, because it may be very unique to one school, from another. And I think that the emphasis from us needs to be, you need to really look at your school and understand what's going on, not just fill out a form, for the state or for the district or whatever. Because it would be an endless amount of time and money spent on the wrong things if we don't take more of a rifle approach to this instead of a shotgun approach. And I consider a shotgun approach just getting the same mathematics textbook for every school and hoping that math scores go up, versus going into every school and saying, what's happening to your math scores? Why did they change in this group of kids? What happened? And talking to those kids and talking to those kids' parents and talking to the teachers of those kids and doing more of, qualitative research, not so much quantitative research, because I don't think that's always going to give the answers. But actually talking to people and asking them what they think is going on. And yeah, that's time consuming, but you could have parents do that for you. That's the kind of thing that parents love to do, or DAC would love to do, is get that information so that you can give it to people who aren't distracted by standardized testing. You have the resources. I mean, the parents in this district are unbelievable in terms of what they can do and their backgrounds in research. And I think that's the solution to our problems, is understanding what's really going on, and I don't think we do.
Jenny?
Comment, which Bruce could probably make just as well as I could. But I think, Shelley, that one of the ways that we are addressing that has to do with the educator effectiveness work that's going on, because a lot of the information that principals are being evaluated on is just that kind of thing. What kind of leadership are you showing in your own community, and what kind of communication is going on within your own school? So, and you know that because you're on, you work on the committee too, but I kind of think that some of that stuff that you're getting at will be, can be addressed in the principal effectiveness work that goes on within educator effectiveness. Don't you?
I think it could be, but I don't think this particular thing might necessarily be. So, for example, if on the educator effectiveness, form, leadership or communication is one of those things. Well, communication could be having meetings, to inform people of the goals of the school or something. But that's not the same as asking people what's happening at a certain level.
Right, but that some of that goes to the work. That's the work of the evaluator, which would be like Sandy for elementary school principals. I mean, some of that's the work of the conversations that go on between the evaluators and the principals, or the assistant superintendents and the principals about, I mean, you're right, we do leave it up to, it's not defined in the document, but it can be defined as part of the evaluation. So I think that's a good place to be sort of thinking about encouraging principals to do that kind of work.
Yeah, that could be a great place to do it.
Sam?
About the climate piece specifically, which at the February DAC meeting I attended, they had made that a priority. I think they recommend it going into the UIP. I don't think that's going to happen, but as we look at climate in our strategic plan, is there anything we are doing, say, before the strategic plan is complete to improve how we work on school climate? I mean, we certainly know that's can be or is a root cause for some students of poor climate. So what are we doing? What can we say to parents and staff that we really want to work on this immediately, in addition to the work we're already doing? Any improvements, any changes without additional resources?
Well, so for some time, our district has conducted climate surveys, and those have informed school-based plans. And so there's a lot going on, as you know, Sam, already in our system around school climate and how students feel about being in school, and the data we receive from Boulder County every 2 years, so you're familiar with all that. So that's really good baseline data. I think that the work group likely this is design work that I'm not going to speak for what a work group will do because that'll be their work to design that. But I think some of it will be to look at what we do know already about what's going on, both in where students are and teachers are around climate, and also do we have the right data? Is there other data we should have, whether it's informal, as Shelley describes, or we will look at all of our instrumentation around that. And then I think the other thing we probably have not done as well over time that we would like to do as a part of this strategic planning process is really, if we're using programs or interventions or services, how effective are they? In other words, are we really clear on what our outcome is, and are we collecting data around that? And I would just say we probably aren't doing that as well as we could. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. But, I mean, I think we'll build on the work that we're doing. So I don't know that we have a quick solution to that. But, I mean, the good news is that a lot of work has already gone on in that area. And, but I think we probably have further analysis to do.
Other comments, questions?
So we will bring this back as an action item on, I think it's April 8th, your next board meeting.
Right.
Is that correct? Because it's listed as a study item.
Right.
So we'll bring it back as an action item.
Right, at our next
regular scheduled business meeting.
regular board meeting. Great. So thank you very much for the explanation and the work you're doing around this with DAC and staff. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the topic revisions to the crisis management policy. And Melissa is making her way to the podium. We have a new policy recommendation here in front of us, attached to the agenda. So, Melissa?
Thank you. So we're moving forward with our K policy section revision. So this one is the next one up for you all to consider. Really, it's just kind of a standard update. It's been 13 years since we've had the board look at this policy. So there have been a lot of changes during that time, most notably this NIMS system. So we need to have a board policy that complies with state law, which basically acknowledges the NIMS system. And then this policy directs the superintendent or designee to implement a plan consistent with that. And that's basically all that would be in the policy. And then the plan is a document that's not in the board's policy manual.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Board members? Jenny?
So I don't have any idea at all about NIMS, but I feel like I should to understand this policy. Could you talk a little bit about what that is or what that requires?
I can talk a very little bit about that, and we've worked with Chris Wilderman is really in charge of that and the plan development piece, but it came out of the Department of Homeland Security several years ago, and it's the training that comes out of that is from FEMA, so it's a federal level set of standards that apply specifically to a lot of agencies, but they have specific standards for public schools.
The NIMS acronym is National Incident Management System.
Okay. Yeah. No,
And it lays out the structure of handling a crisis.
Okay. Are we in compliance?
We are.
I'll send you a link, Jenny, for your evening reading.
Oh, thank you. I was worried about that.
On the way.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I guess we'll bring this back on an action item in our next regular board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Tom, please.
You know, we talked about this before. We learned a lot from our recent flood crisis. And not necessarily we put that in a policy, but curiosity of how are we taking those lessons learned and putting it into our plan going forward.
So Chris Wilderman, who's our Director of Safety and Environmental Services, and also Rick Kellogg, who assists him. Rick's a relatively new employee to our district. Part of their charge under Don Orr's leadership is that we've, the other document that will accompany this that isn't, it's a procedural or regulation, is really trying to incorporate a number of the protocols and practices that we've been working on for over a year. We haven't been waiting to do some of the things for a year, but we've been trying to reach, common agreement of things that we can set as a standard across the district. So that's probably the bigger picture, Tom, the work that's going on. Specific to the situation in the fall, I mean, we've done significant debriefing. We just recently met, within a month, I suppose now, and several of us that spent the weekend in this building and a few days beyond that, really just reviewing what worked. I mean, that's more of a response piece, but Briggs and others were involved as far as communication, our connectivity. You'll see in some conversation around SIPSI as a radio system because being reliant on cellular technology has risk in a broad, large emergency. So some of it relates to the fall event, but it really is embedded in bigger discussions. Our students that were stranded in the mountains, both our communication with them. We just recently have purchased radios that we've placed in that camp. That's a camp we use a lot, so we were reliant on others' forms. We got it done, but we knew there could be, and parents have supported us with that. So we I'd say lessons learned. I mean, overall, we felt it went really pretty well, and with the partnership with a lot of other county and federal agencies, but we did take some takeaway with that. And I have a high level of confidence in Chris, both in his training and building off the work we've done around NIMS, and but we also see it as a journey. We're always just hopeful we get a certain number of things in place before we have to use them. But there's an accompanying document, which once it's finalized, we'd be glad to share with you. It's kind of the how-to. Right. And it'll be evolving as we go forward, so.
I certainly didn't mean to imply we did a bad job.
No,
I thought we did a very good job, and everyone's responses be commended, of course. I just wanted to see if we had a process for reviewing that sense like we do, and taking those things and putting them into future planning.
So one of the things we did today, for example, is reached out to the counties to say just exactly where are we with the 4 Mile Creek restoration and flood mitigation plan, given the anticipated spring melt. So we had a good exchange today with county planners and work that they're doing. I mean, so we're a little anxious about that, as the whole county is, but obviously with Crestview situated where it was. So anyway, but yeah, so that's more of an immediate response, but we'll continue to do that analysis as well.
Okay.
But, yeah, thanks for asking, Tom.
Other questions or comments, board members? Seeing none, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, and we'll bring this back at our next regular board meeting. So, the next item on our agenda is agenda setting. Do board members have any topics they would like to suggest to the agenda setting committee to schedule, in addition to what's already on the table? Well, no? Okay, seeing none. Then this meeting is adjourned.
See you a week from tonight at 5 o'clock.
Oh, sorry, that's right, I meant to say that. Yeah, we